Welcome to the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, founder of Expansive CEO and X Squared Wealth Planning. Buckle in as we explore how to create true prosperity and build a business and a life that expands beyond yourself and makes a dent in the universe. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Expansive CEO podcast. I am your host, Hannah Chapman, and I am here solo today for Investment Friday. So recording this on Thursday, June 13th, to be posted on Friday, June 14th, just so you know the market conditions as they are happening right now when this is being posted. Today, I actually have a really special topic about how to fund a Roth IRA for your children if you are a business owner. So I'm going to talk a little bit about current economy and inflation first, and then I'm going to go into the special topic for today. So if you are a business owner and you have children, definitely stick around for this episode. And if you're a business owner and you don't have kids, consider forwarding this to any of your friends who do have children. And, or if you're not a business owner, but you have a friend who is a business owner or a family member who has kids, definitely forward this to them to share. So I'm really, really excited about this particular strategy, and I wanted to share it for the people that it might apply to. So first, again, it is Thursday, June 13th, 2024. And this year in the markets, we have been really watching for inflation data and watching the Federal Reserve to see when they might lower interest rates. The market is really waiting for interest rates to come down. And we've been, expecting different things at different times. If, when Brad and I talked earlier in the year, we were saying, the forecast is that we'll start to see some interest rate drops in mid-year, June, July here. And the data really has not come in that is, pushing the Fed to lower those interest rates just yet. So Jay Powell, the chairman of the Federal Open Market Committee, or FOMC, or the Fed, it's all the same thing. He came out yesterday on Wednesday and said that inflation is coming down. It's looking good, but it's not down to the level yet where they're comfortable cutting interest rates. So the market did take a little bit of a dip yesterday afternoon on that news, kind of digesting it, saying, oh, okay, so we're not getting an interest rate cut here in the mid-year like we maybe thought. So at this point, they're really looking for inflation to be at that 2 to 2.5% range. And we're still at, the last reading was at about 3.3% inflation year over year, which means that prices for a lot of goods and services, like the average price increase was 3.3% this year, this June versus last June 2023. That's what that's measuring. So as we keep going through the year, if we start to see that inflation data come in lower, get closer to that 2% number, that's when we're likely going to see an interest rate cut. So new projections are, we might see one interest rate reduction this year, late in the year, and we'll kind of see what happens, especially as the presidential election happens later this year in November in the U.S. That always, has a little bit of an effect on the market as well. So we'll just wait and see there. So that's the update on the market right now. Things are actually the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ just closed at all-time highs. Or the S&P 500 definitely closed at an all-time high. Today, the NASDAQ surged. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closed slightly lower today, but it's still at, a pretty high level compared to what we've seen in the last several years for sure. So markets are trending up for the moment. Now we are going to switch over to talk about a question that I actually was able to discuss, and I've been discussing with a pair of my clients over the last several months. And to give a little bit of background, um, they are both entrepreneurs. The husband has an S corporation. He has a business, and it files taxes as an S corporation. And the wife has an LLC, sole proprietorship. They have two children who are 13 and 10, who have some savings for them in UTMA accounts. And we're looking at what's the best place, what's their best option for how to save for the kids for college without having something that's locked up and only for college. And so this is where we've been having this discussion of, okay, what's the best option depending on what your goals are for the kids, and for what they are able to experience and what they're able to use those funds for. So there's a lot to consider here when we're talking about education planning, and especially being a business owner as well, right? That and both people in this couple being business owners, they also have potentially, grandparents that have 529 plans for the kids already, not necessarily, fully funded to the point where that pays for college, but a little something in a 529 plan that they could use if they decide to go to college. One of the big considerations for a lot of parents right now has been around, do we want to actually save the amount that it's going to take to put kids through college? There's a lot of question. I've been seeing this in my whole entire client base, and then even wider conversation beyond that, that college is very, very expensive right now. And if we look back at the average, so I remember back in, when I started in financial planning back in 2007, we were looking, we would create projections for people who wanted to save for their kids for college, and we would use a 5.5% inflation rate on the cost of education to kind of see what that would be like. And back then, when we were projecting for now kids going to college in 2022, 2024, it was looking like, oh, it's going to cost somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000 per year per kid. And back in 2007, you tell someone that and they're like, oh my gosh, that's crazy for like a state school. And sure enough, here we are in 2024, and that is very average for a lot of state schools, is that $28,000 to $30,000 range for 1 year of college. So I say that to then illustrate that when we are projecting now, so for kids who are babies or kids who are 10 or 13 in this case, right? What's it going to be in another 5, 10, 15, 18 years? We're still going to use that 5.5% inflation rate just to say, like, okay, this is what it's been historically. But at the same time, a lot of these parents are saying, I I can't imagine paying $75,000 a year per kid for college education, and potentially spending $1 million on education for two kids is what that can end up looking like over the course of an education, right? And so with that, with this is like new idea of what it means to support your kids, to be able to provide for them, and if they go to college, there's still a desire to be able to help, and there's still a desire to have them start their lives afterwards without student loan debt. That is another big theme across my client base as well, that most of my my parents in my client base don't want their kids to have hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt to start their life. when we look at different ways to save, then that's where this strategy of utilizing a Roth IRA, which is what I teased in the beginning of the episode, comes in really, really handy, especially for parents who are business owners. So there are some nuances here, and we're going to go through those, but I'm going to just share a little bit more about why this is such an interesting option for people who are looking to save. So the traditional education assets that are available to most of us are 529 education plans. So it's called a Section 529 plan. And in a 529 plan, you are able to save. In some states, not every state, in some states, there's a state tax deduction. So I'm in Ohio. So for example, for Ohio, if you live in Ohio and you save to the Ohio State 529 plan, you also get a tax deduction on your state taxes up to a $4,000 contribution. So there's a little, deduction there. But on the federal level, there is no federal tax deduction for a 529 contribution. What the 529 does then is if you get it invested into the stock market in some way, shape, or form, it will then grow tax deferred. So let's say you put $10,000 into a 529 plan for your 1-year-old. And that plan then has 17 years to grow before this 1-year-old goes to college. That $10,000 will have the opportunity to grow over that time. And let's say in 17 years, it is now at $200,000. Just for math's sake. I didn't do any math. We'll just say that $190,000 of growth over that time. Let's say you knocked it out of the park. You got a great investment in there. That $190,000 of growth has grown without being taxed through all of those 17 years. And that is the benefit. That's the really big benefit, actually, of putting money into a tax deferred plan. And so in this case, we're talking about a 529 plan. If that child then goes to college or to another approved secondary education school, they can use all $200,000 of that to pay for college, and it will be completely tax-free. So you will never pay taxes on that $190,000 of gain if it is used for qualified education expenses. So that's the rub there. It has to be used for qualified education expenses. If instead that child does not go to college, and let's say they do something different, they do an apprenticeship, they go into the workforce, they could use it for, if they go to a trade school, you could use 529 money for a trade school. So that's an option as well, but they likely wouldn't use that much money. Trade schools are much less expensive than a 4-year university, right? So let's say that option is great and they go to a trade school and they spend $50,000 at a trade school to get the degree that they need, and they've got $150,000 left in this 529 plan. What's going to happen with that? Well, there are options and we could talk about that as well. I'm not going to go into all the options for that 529 plan, which there are some good ones now. But the main thing that you would do with that, like if you just take it out, if you just took that $150,000 out and did anything else with it, you're going to pay a 10% penalty. You're going to pay taxes on that growth, and then you're going to pay a 10% tax penalty as well on that growth if you don't use it for higher education. So that in and of itself has become a deterrent for some people. They don't want to be saving into an account that is just for education. And if it's used for anything else, that it's going to be penalized, taxed and penalized. And I get that. And there are other, there's other nuances to this as well. I want to say that I'm very well aware of the other options that we have with Roth IRAs. There are other nuances. You could change the beneficiary. You could save it for, a grandchild one day. There's a lot of stuff that you can do with it. But the crux of the argument is that it is technically for education, and you have to be really careful about what else you do with it if you don't use it for education, or else it's going to have that 10% penalty tax plus regular income tax. The other option that some people have used that I almost never recommend, just to be completely transparent, is a Coverdell IRA. And a Coverdell IRA is specifically for education as well. And it's very similar to the 529. It just has lower limits of what you're allowed to put in each year. Again, I almost never ever recommend a Coverdell IRA, so I'm not really going to go into it. I just thought I would mention that that's another option. The other thing that you can do if you're saving for children is put that money into what's called an UTMA or UGMA account. So that's UTMA in some states and UGMA in other states, just depends. But it's Uniform Transfer to Minors Act or Uniform Gift to Minors Act, or what those two things stand for. An UTMA account means if you put money into that account for your child, that is their money. It is for their benefit. And you, as the parent or whoever owns the account, are the custodian of that money, but it must be used for that child. As soon as you put it in, it is now their money. It must be used for their benefit. The UTMA and UGMA rules also have an age of majority attached to them. So in some states, that age of majority is 18, and some states that age is 21. So it depends on where you live. But that means that when your child reaches that age of majority, let's say it's 21, I think in Ohio it's 21. So your child turns 21, they now have full access to that UTMA account to do with as they please because it is their money. If you try to withhold that from them, that's actually technically that's illegal. That's not what that account is for. It's not for you to keep control of it once they're at the age of majority. That is now their money. And if you were to save, let's say instead of saving to a 529, you save to an UTMA and they've got, $200,000 in an UTMA account that now they're able to use, that's another whole question, right? You would hope that a child whose parents were able to save that for them would also have introduced them to someone who could help them, figure out their choices and understand the implications of all of that and have a at least beginning stage of financial awareness about that, but you never know. So that's sometimes a deterrent for the UTMA or UGMA account as well, is that, it does get turned over to them fully when they reach that age of majority. The other thing with the UTMA/UGMA accounts is that they are taxed on growth. So if you have a fairly substantial UTMA account, if it has more than, this year, it's around $1,300 of passive income. So that would be capital gain or dividend or interest income. They're going to be taxed on that gain or that passive income. So it doesn't get to grow tax deferred the way that the 529 or the Coverdell account does. So that's a whole aspect to be considered as well with the UTMA or UGMA account. It's not growing tax deferred. So those are some of the other options, and with these clients in particular, we talked about all of those things, and it just didn't. Still was like, I don't know what the right thing is. That still doesn't feel great. But I don't know. Let's keep kind of like waiting until something feels right. And then finally, we got to the option of, what if you were able to pay the children from your business and then contribute to a Roth IRA for them? And that is the strategy that ended up being the one that was like, that makes the most sense in a few different ways. So that's what we're going to talk about in more detail here. So with being a small business owner, you are allowed to hire your children and pay them. And that payment is tax deductible to the business, like it would be for any other contractor or employee. Now, what you want to consider here is it does need, like the IRS does specify that it needs to be like a job, right? Like something that they can actually do and actually help with. You're not just, mm, paying them for doing absolutely nothing in the business just to shelter some taxes, right? We're not advocating for that on this podcast ever. But if there is something that they can do that is helpful, that allows you to, frees up some of your time or teaches them a valuable skill, right? This is such a good, when you have a business, this is such an awesome thing to be able to do for your children, is to like help them learn about things and get paid at the same time. So in each year, there's something called a kiddie tax, and there's a limit to what children can earn before they are made to pay any tax on their income. In 2024, that limit is 14,600. This matches the standard deduction amount. So that's why it's 14,600. So if you pay your child $14,600 or less, when they go to file their taxes, they will get to take the standard deduction, which this year is 14,600 for a single person. And so it takes their income down to zero. So there is no federal or state income tax on that income. So that's that first part. You can pay your child up to $14,600, and that'll be a deduction from the business, and it will also not be taxed for the child. The nuance here that I'm going to place in this spot is that if your business is an S corporation or a C corporation and you pay your child from either an S corp or a C corp, you will have to pay payroll taxes on that. So that doesn't, it's like it takes away a little bit of the magic here, because that's 15.3% total, right? That you have to pay, because you have to pay the employer side, and then the employee side for the child, who is your child, right, is going to pay the other half. So that is 15.3% that will come off of that income if you're paying them through an S corp or a C corp. It's still a pretty good strategy overall, but that does like limit it a little bit. If, however, your business is an LLC, files as an LLC, and is not an S corporation or a C corporation, but rather LLC, sole proprietorship, I guess even a partnership that doesn't file as an S corporation, right? Any of those other entities, then you can pay them as a contractor and you don't pay any of the payroll tax. And from the child side, since the full, if it's under that 14,000 or 14,600 or less, the standard deduction will wipe it out. And so they also will not have to pay any payroll tax on that. So there's that one nuance for you there. So in the case of the clients that I mentioned, the one partner who has an S corporation, we would not want to pay the children through that business. We would want to try to pay them through the other partner's business, which is a sole proprietorship, right? So that would save that 15.3% on payroll taxes, which is your Social Security and your Medicare. The second piece of this, right, is that with the Roth IRA, you must have earned income. The child has to have earned income in order to contribute to a Roth IRA. You cannot save to a Roth IRA if you do not have earned income. And so that's where, okay, if we pay the child from the business, now they have earned income and we can now save that into the Roth IRA on their behalf. The Roth IRA has some really, really awesome benefits to it that are actually quite similar to a 529 plan if used for education. So we're going to go into that. But there's even more. Like there's other qualities to it that are just really awesome. So if you are able to pay your child from your business, they have earned income. Anyone under the age of 50 who has income within the correct range for them to be able to contribute to a Roth IRA, which in this example it is, they can contribute up to $7,000 in 2024 to a Roth IRA. So if you pay them, for example, let's make the numbers real easy. Let's say you're like, okay, I want to do this and pay them exactly $7,000. And so I'll pay them $7,000 and then we'll move that into their Roth IRA, right? Then that's you took a deduction from your business. So you didn't pay taxes on that $7,000. The child is below that standard deduction level. So there's no taxes owed there because they didn't make enough money to owe taxes. So there's no tax there. And then it goes into a Roth IRA. Why is this special? It's special because the Roth IRA then grows tax-free. And later on, the growth, when you hit age 59 and a half, that growth is taken out completely tax-free. So if you were to utilize this strategy for your children, you would not pay taxes on that $7,000. The child would not pay taxes on that $7,000. If that $7,000 stays in the Roth IRA until they are, 59 and a half, they will also never pay taxes on any of those dollars. And that is like mind blowing, really, to think like, oh my God, this is possible. That's awesome. So when we look at the other reasons for this, so you might be looking at that and saying, okay, but that's like so far away, right? That's 59 and a half. My kid is 10 years old. That's 49 and a half years. What if they need the money before then? The beauty of the Roth IRA is that whatever you put in as an after-tax contribution by nature of the fact that it's a Roth IRA. So you're putting your money in tax-free or after tax, rather, excuse me, you're putting it in after tax already. And after, if the Roth IRA has been open for 5 years or more, you can actually take your contributions back out. So anything that you put in, you've technically already paid taxes on it, beyond the fact that we just discussed that it's a tax deduction, so you don't actually pay taxes on it, and the kids get a deduction, right? Standard deduction. So this is all legal. This is all up above board. There is nothing unsavory about this strategy. But technically, right, it's an after-tax contribution. So if you are, let's say your child you put it in when they're 10 and you fund that Roth IRA for 5 years and it's got $35,000. You got 5 years of $7,000. It's got $35,000 of cost basis of what you put in. If they turn 20 and they're like, hey, I actually would like to use some of that for something else, whatever that is. Let's say the account has doubled in that time. It's got $70,000 in it. So it's got $35,000 of cost basis, $35,000 of your contributions, and then $35,000 of growth. Your child could take that $35,000 of cost basis of the contributions out with no penalty whatsoever because it's just return of cost basis. There's no tax implication to that. That money is available because taxes were already figured in with those. The other piece of magic here with the Roth IRA, so there is, again, ability for the child to take money out if needed, as long as the account has been open for enough time. The other piece is that if you use the money for education, you also have the benefit of the growth. So we'll use that same example. Say there's $70,000 in this Roth IRA. And if they want to use it all for education, the $35,000 that was contributed is never taxed because, again, it just won't be. It's already gone through its taxation process. The $35,000 of growth in that would be taxed just as regular income. There's no penalty when it's used for higher education purposes. So normally, if you take money out of an IRA early, there's a 10% penalty, a 10% excise tax is what they call that. But if you use it for higher education, it's not. You don't have to do that. You don't have to pay that. All you have to pay is the regular income tax on the growth. So that's a little bit of a nuance, right? Because if you leave it for retirement, you don't pay any taxes on any of the growth if you wait till retirement. So there is, that's a little bit of a change, but it's there. It's available for you if you want to use that for education. There's also other stipulations that you can take from IRAs. You can take up to $10,000 from your Roth IRA completely tax-free for a house down payment. And so, I'm sorry, not tax-free, but you would just pay, again, the regular income tax. You would not pay the 10% penalty if you use it for a house down payment. So money is available for that, right? If you wanted to use it, say, hey, your kid is maybe in their mid-20s or their early 30s, and they would love to buy a house, that could be a source for them that they could use potentially the cost basis. They could take the cost basis out if it's been aged long enough and $10,000 of the growth and pay just regular income tax on the growth of that 10,000 and use that for a house down payment. So there are lots of different options that you can use the money for. And if they don't need it for college, if they don't need it for a house down payment, let's say they get a great job. Let's say they get scholarships to go to school where they want to go, or they start their own business. Right, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. They start their own business and they're rocking and rolling, and they don't need this money. They can then, when they're earning their own income, they can then contribute to their Roth IRA, assuming that they're within all the limits for, the income limits to contribute to a Roth. They can do this for themselves. So they can take over and they can start contributing to their Roth IRA as well. And the compounding growth on that money over their lifetime is absolutely absolutely magical. We talked about this a little bit last week when we talked about um, the question from, my friend who was asking about, how do I get my teens to be excited about finances, basically, right? So if we look at this, I'm going to go back to my favorite here. I'm going to share my screen, my favorite little super simple compound of interest calculator. And let's say you fund um, a Roth IRA for 5 years. So we're going to say you've already funded it for 5 years. It's not perfect math this time, but just go with me. $35,000. And we're not doing any other contributions, but even just that. So they're 15. And by the time they're 65, right? So we're going to say 50 years. And we're going to go with the long-term S&P average of 8%. We're going to put a 2% differential on there. So sometimes we could see what it would be if it was 10% average and what it would be if it was 6% average over that time. And we're going to do quarterly compounding there. So from that, if they didn't touch it until they were 65 and didn't put anything else in either. So that's the magic here. That $35,000 investment left to grow at 8% is $1.836 million, $1,836,971 over the course of that time. At 10%, if it happens to earn more than that, an average is 10% per year, that's 4.8 million. That's nearly $5 million from a $35,000 investment. If we actually, so let's say, we'll make the time frame a little bit shorter. So, and we're going to say that they contribute a little bit as well, even say $500 per month that they can contribute over the next 40 years. That turns into $2.5 million. So we shorten the time frame by 10 years. But at 8%, if they're contributing, and so they're at 55 now, and they've got either $2.5 million if it's been growing at 8% average, or $4.8 million if it's been growing at 10%. So over that time, right, we can really look at that. We can even look at 50 years again, so we can see a better comparison. So that comparison before, if we didn't put anything else in and let it grow for 50 years, that was about 1.8 million. If you add to it, if they add to it over time, $500 per month, that's 5.7 million almost at that average 8% return rate. If they have an average return rate of 10%, you can see it on the screen here, that's $13 million over that time. So truly the magic of compounding interest. And it's not magic, but it feels like magic when you think you can put $35,000 into something, let it sit for 50 years, and then, have almost $2 million without doing anything else, just letting the market do its work. That's a huge benefit. It's a huge benefit to your kids. And when we don't know in 50 years time, honestly, with inflation, it won't be worth the same amount that it's worth today, but that will still be a significant amount of money, right? No matter what, that's going to be a significant leg up for your children, for your heirs, maybe for your grandchildren at that point, right? Like it's setting them up for more financial safety and stability throughout their lives, as well, by using a vehicle like this. And again, in a Roth IRA in particular, that we'll use that, high side $13 million example, that's completely tax free as laws are written right now. I can't say what they'll be in 50 years, but as of right now, that would be $13 million of tax free money. When you pull the money out, you don't pay taxes on it because it's in a Roth IRA. So all of that to say that I think this is such a powerful strategy. And if you're not utilizing it yet and you have the ability to in any way, shape, or form, that I think it's really, really, really a great idea. And I say that knowing that everyone's financial situation is unique. And, if this works for you, then that's amazing. And I love it. If you are not sure, okay, so this is another piece. If you're not sure if this is the right move for you, but you're really, really interested, you hear this and you're like, oh my gosh, I definitely want to think about that or see if that's a good fit for me and my family. Highly, highly encourage you to talk to a financial advisor. If you have someone that can help you with this, that's wonderful. If you don't have someone that can help you with this, you can give me a call. Like I said, this was literally like me and my clients talking about this week, and I was excited about it, so I wanted to share. So this is something that I do and something that I work on. And just one of the one of the ways that financial planning really is holistic for, not just your life, not just your taxes, but really looking into the future for your children as well, and looking in at all the different ways. I think that's what I loved most about this exploration with this particular couple was that we really did like flesh out all the different ways that they could save for the kids, all the different avenues, like what feels good, not wanting it to be locked into just education, um, not wanting it to be, um, they didn't really have an issue with the UTMA account. Like if we give them this money and it's totally theirs at 21, they didn't have a problem with that at all. But the tax benefits of the Roth IRA are what are so different from the UTMA, in this particular case. With the UTMA, so I'm going to go over this one more time. With the UTMA account, it's like a just regular brokerage account for that you could have for any reason. And so that money that you save into the brokerage account is not tax deductible in any way, shape, or form. It's just money that you've already paid taxes on. So from that perspective, right, they would be paying their, 22, 24% tax rate at least on their money before it could go into the UTMA. This shift, and then once it's in the UTMA, it's still taxable. It's growing in a taxable account. It's not tax deferred. And when they sell anything from it, they're going to pay capital gain taxes as well. So say that same account, exactly, if you did the exact same thing and it had $70,000 in that same time frame we talked about before, and 35,000 of it was gain, they're going to pay capital gain taxes on that $35,000 depending on what capital gain taxes look like in the future, right? So, the UTMA does not have as good of tax treatment as the Roth IRA does. And so that was the real kicker here, was that we could pay them from the business, not pay taxes, deduct that from the business because it's a business expense, paying contractors. The kids don't pay taxes on it because it's within the standard deduction range. And the money grows tax deferred in the Roth IRA. And if it's used in the right ways, it receives really phenomenally beneficial tax treatment later down the road. So yeah, it was really cool to explore all of those options, really dive into what each one would look like. And one thing that I'm going to say that I so appreciate from my clients is that they ask deep questions and they ask super thoughtful questions, and they want to understand, okay, what are my options? What's best? Give me my options, and let's really talk about them and why. Like, why is this a good idea? Why is this a better idea? What are the pros and cons of each one, right? And we really like dived into all of that together. Um and we have the time. So we have the time to do that. We have the time to do that when we work together and make thoughtful decisions that are good for them, good for their family, good for their kids, good for their budget, all of that, all of that. And so, it was just such a fun thing to do, which sounds really nerdy. And I'm going to go ahead and own that, because I did think it was fun. And I was really excited when they're like, yes, Roth IRA, that's the thing we want to do. Book it. Um, that was, I felt excited about that, for them to make a decision that felt good for them and for their family. So I will own all of my nerdiness there, that lights me up, because it's a part of what I do. It's a piece of who I am, and a way that I'm like really, really overjoyed, really, that I get to help people in this way. Take these big, complex issues, boil them down into, like, here are the necessary things that we really have to talk about. And then, okay, now we have more questions. We can open that up. We can add a little more detail. We can flesh it out a little bit more at the client's pace. where they can really understand what's happening. And then I also, just to be like completely clear, I also have clients who um, don't ask as many questions, who are like, okay, like, what's the best option? Or maybe what's the best one or two options? Which do you think is best for our family based on all of the things that you know? And they're like, cool, all right, book that one. That's great. Um, and it can be either way, but I enjoy meeting my clients where they're at in that capacity. So that's my special story for today, client story, and just that strategy. So again, if you are a business owner and you're thinking about, hey, how might I be able to incorporate that strategy? It sounds great. And also, do you have other things that I should be thinking about as a business owner? Yes, 100% I do. I love it. So again, if you are a business owner and you don't have kids and you know people who do, who this might be a really good episode for, go ahead. I would be honored, actually. I would be super honored for you to share this with other people who could benefit from it. And if you're listening and this was sent to you, I would absolutely love to hear if you have questions or if this like sparked anything else for you. And you can always send me questions at Hannah, HANNAH, at expansiveceo.com. That's where I receive all questions for the podcast. And you can also find me on LinkedIn, on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube as well. And you can ask questions there. I get questions on my YouTube channel, and I'm so happy to answer those as well. So yeah, if this sparked anything for you and you're wondering more and you have more questions, feel free, and don't just feel free, feel invited. You are invited to share your questions with me, and I am so happy to answer them. So for today, that is our episode of Investment Friday. And I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful week and weekend. And we'll see you next Tuesday with another awesome interview episode. Thanks, everyone. That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and be sure to like and subscribe. And again, if anything resonated with you from this episode, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Hannah, HANNAH, at expansiveceo.com and tell me about it. And if you're ready for your greatest expansion, you can find ways to work with me at expansiveceo.com and at x2wealthplanning.com. That's X, the numeral 2, wealthplanning.com. So until next time, remember that there is enough. You are enough. And your birthright in this lifetime is to be expansive.